I've always been in favor of transparencies. I've been saying for months that this report should be released. Get it all on the table. Let the American people see it. Let them draw their own conclusions. And I think that's better for all of us.
Republican Congressman Chris Stewart joining Cavuto Live over the weekend on why he believes the entire Mueller report should be released to the public. My next guest agrees that Americans deserve to be able to judge it for themselves. Republican Senator from Louisiana, Sen.Kennedy, joins me now. Senator, thanks for joining us.
You bet, Charles.
The House voted 420 to zip. President Trump said, he would like to see it released. It's up to Attorney General William Barr, so perhaps it will be released.
It'll be released, Charles, either voluntarily or this is Washington, D.C. It'll leak. The real issue is whether it'll leak in pieces or whether it'll leak in toto. Look, and once it is released, it'll probably be an act of melodrama in this sense. I read the Attorney General's letter very carefully. I mean, here's the bottom line. Mr. Mueller, after what, 2 years, 2,800 subpoenas, Mr. Mueller and his team of 40 FBI agents and 19 lawyers said there was no conclusion in terms of obstruction of justice. They said they couldn't draw any conclusions, but they weren't bringing or recommending an indictment. This is over, like the old Willie Nelson song says, turn out the lights, the party's over. It's time to move on. I'm hoping our Democratic friends will let us do that.
To that point, however, because of the breadth that you just laid out and you just described, Robert Mueller's team went after and looked after a lot of people. They went down every rabbit hole possible. And there's some concerns out there that some folks whose names might have intersected with this report will be revealed, and somehow that they could become either targets of scrutiny or just ridicule by politicians or the media. So just how deeply should this be redacted? Because you've got of course, we've got national security issues, you've got executive privilege, and we have folks who are innocent whose names might have popped up.
I don't want to see anybody hurt, but it's important that this report be released to the American people. Now, for 2 years, we've heard rumors and innuendo, and in some case, outright allegations that the president is a crook, that the people around him are in bed with the Russians. Now Mr. Mueller has drawn his conclusions, finding that there's no evidence of the collusion, and it's important that the American people be able to see that. Part of the problem, Charles, with Washington, D.C., there are too many permanent Washington types up here that think they're smarter and more virtuous than the American people, and that they ought to be able to make decisions for the American people. I trust the American people. Let them see the report. They'll draw their own conclusions. But I think the Attorney General's already told us what's in it.
Senator, are you concerned, though, that some of these political opponents of the president may just use this whole period of whether it's Barr coming to Capitol Hill, the release of the report, to just further the sort of the narrative that still something is wrong after all of these years, these last 2 years of saying that Mueller is the man and he's qualified and he's going to do a great job? Do you feel like now maybe they'll try to work really hard to discredit the whole process?
Some of them will. I regret that. I hope I'm wrong, but some of them will. But some Democrats, I like to think, are going to be willing to move on. I mean, Mr. Mueller has spoken very, very clearly. Let me say it again. There's no collusion. He's not bringing an indictment on obstruction of justice. It's over. It's time to move on. If you care about the American, our country, the American country, and you want to try to solve the real problems in this country, like, for example, the cost of health insurance, it's time to move on. But will the Dems do it? I hope so, but probably not all of them will.
Well, they better put a finger in the air because there might be some investigation fatigue out there. Sir, always appreciate your wisdom. Thank you very much, Senator Kennedy.
Thanks, Charles.
Well, Democrats showing no sign of letting up. So how should Republicans respond? Let's ask Wisconsin Senator John Barrasso, chairman of the Republican Conference Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us. A lot of your colleagues across the aisle in both the House and Senate seem determined to continue this, and I think the one thread they're holding on to was from the part where Mueller didn't have an opinion on obstruction, but Attorney General Barr said there was no collusion and no obstruction.
The headlines are very clear, Charles. No collaboration, no collusion, no conspiracy. You know, I think that this entire Mueller report is something. He was somebody when he was named. The Democrats said he's the right person. He's the best person for the job. He's done a very thorough job over the last 2 years. I want the full report released, but the headlines are clear. No conspiracy.
And by the way, Senator, I moved your state from the great state of Wyoming.
Thank you.
Okay. But it's pretty obvious the first 24 hours since this report has been out that many in the media and many in Washington, D.C. are not going to let it go. Conversely, what are Republicans going to do? Because President Trump is okay with the report being released. The House voted 420-0 to have it released. It's obvious that the entire report won't be released. I mean, that's just pretty much common sense. But where do your Senate colleagues stand on the public getting a look at this?
It's time to release the report. The public deserves accountability, transparency. The public spent $21 million of taxpayer money. The public has waited for 2 years for the report. I'd say make sure the public gets to see the report. They will see what the results are of, 500 search warrants, 2,800 subpoenas, hundreds and hundreds of interviews. They've done all of this work, very thorough, very complete. No conspiracy, no collusion.
Senator, President Trump at one point saying this was an illegal takedown that failed. Lindsey Graham suggesting he would like to get to the bottom of it. Is there an appetite now for another investigation to go into the source of this, into this probe to again, and many are saying this is not just for President Trump, but this is to protect all future presidents from something as flimsy perhaps as what led to this investigation ever going down this path again?
Well, Lindsey Graham, as you know, is a pit bull. He is going to dig into this, and he's going to fight hard to find out what generated all of this. For my part, as a senator from Wyoming, my focus continues to be jobs, the economy, national security, legislating. There's so much we need to do. We have a crisis at the border that I'm focused on as well. So there are committees, the Select Committee on Intelligence that Chairman Burr is working on, along with Lindsey Graham and the Judiciary Committee. I think they'll get to the bottom of it as well.
Speaking of jobs, a lot of controversy over a procedural vote on the Green New Deal. Apparently the folks who championed it, who said, you know, we've got 12 years left before the planet implodes, are now vocally against any sort of vote on this. Would it be a political gimmick, or is it the best way to let the folks in America know where people stand on this?
I think it's important to let the American people know where the Democrats, and specifically the Democrats running for president, stand on this. But it does seem they want to duck it, they want to dodge it, they want to distance themselves from this so-called Green New Deal, which, as you know, Charles, is unworkable and unaffordable. $93 trillion of the cost would empty everyone's savings account in America. They're talking $65,000 a year would be the cost to the average family in America. Energy costs would go up about $3,800 per family every year, and it won't accomplish anything of what they really say they want to do in terms of actually changing emissions. The United States emissions have been dropping over the last 13 years, and we're only 13% of the global emissions, Charles. China and India, they are 33%, and their emissions continue to go up.
Yeah. It's remarkable that they don't want to go ahead with this vote, but probably it will. Senator Barrasso from Wyoming, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Charles.
President Trump signing an executive order this afternoon officially recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israeli territory. Israel has occupied the disputed territory on its border with Syria since the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. This all coming after a rocket fired from Gaza this morning struck a home near Tel Aviv, injuring 7 people, including 2 children. Jonathan Tobin is editor-in-chief of JNS.org and a contributor to National Review. Lots to talk about here. Israel obviously heading into an election. The prime minister sort of in a fight for his political life here, comes to America. President Trump's a good friend of his, and does this big news on the Golan Heights on a day when there is an attack in Israel.
Yeah, this visit is interesting because it's clear that President Trump, who has just been cleared on the charges of colluding with Russia in an American election, is now dabbling a little bit in interfering in Israel's election by helping Prime Minister Netanyahu.
But not trying to, but like fake news, by like actual policies. Take a listen to what Netanyahu said earlier today.
Has been blessed to have many friends who sat in the Oval Office. But Israel has never had a better friend than you. You show this time and again. You show this when you withdrew from the disastrous nuclear deal with Iran.
How important is this relationship and going back then to campaign in Israel?
I think it definitely helps Netanyahu. You have to understand that virtually every one of Trump's predecessors in the White House has tried to interfere in Israeli elections, dating back to Bill Clinton, who admitted that, he did everything to defeat Netanyahu in '96. Barack Obama did everything he could to defeat Netanyahu.
And they had a terrible relationship.
And they had a terrible relationship. But the thing is, Obama was very unpopular. Trump, because his policies are so closely aligned with Israel, in the eyes of Israelis, he's doing the right thing. So therefore, his embrace of Netanyahu has to help him. And the fact that he's pretty much ignored, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in Israel last week, ignored Netanyahu's chief rival. Benny Gantz, who is running ahead of Netanyahu in some of the polls, is in Washington. He's getting no love from the administration. So
what about, and this Golan Heights decision, how consequential is that?
I think it's another boost. Listen, nobody in Israel, not even Netanyahu's opponents, were considering giving up the Golan, especially not after the Syrian civil war turned it into, there is no possibility.
Well, and hasn't Syria sort of abdicated its own responsibility? I mean, they're not a responsible player.
They're not. They're barely a sovereign country.
Right.
Iran, Hezbollah, Russia is in there. So Israel wasn't going to give it up, but recognizing Israeli sovereignty there kind of sends a message to Iran, but it also sends a message to Israel's voters that I'm on Netanyahu's side.
Indeed.
Give my friend a break.
All right.
It may work.
Jonathan Tobin, you can check him out. You can find his writing just about everywhere, but jns.org and National Review and the New York Post. Thank you so much.
Thank you.